Venice, 1500. In the year 1500, Venice had already become one of the most important cities in the Mediterranean world. A city marked by unprecedented maritime power, breathtaking architectural splendor, and an intricate network of trade that stretched from England to the Levant. Within a generation, the city would be transformed by the War of the League of Cambrai, marked by the loss of its mainland territories and redefined as part of a slowly declining yet still magnificent republic that would endure for centuries. In this video, I use modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical paintings, maps, and engravings to life, altering perspective, changing camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artists could never have imagined. The goal is not just to observe the past, but to experience it, to walk through Venice as it was then, and imagine what it would have been like to be there, from the coronation of Doge Leonardo Loredan to the height of Venetian Renaissance glory. And if you stay until the end, we'll compare these same locations with their current appearance to see what time has changed and what still remains. The heart of Venice beat strongest in the Piazza San Marco, where the Doge's palace rose from the waterfront like a testament to Republican power rendered in pink Verona marble and white Istrian stone. The palace's Gothic arcades opened onto the piazza in a rhythm of pointed arches and delicate columns, each one supporting the weight of an empire that ruled the waves. Inside, the great council chamber could hold more than 1,000 nobles, the largest governing body in Europe, their voices echoing off walls that would soon be adorned by Tintoretto and Veronese. The palace was more than a seat of government. It was a carefully constructed stage where Venice performed its own mythology, where ambassadors from distant lands would climb the giant staircase and pass beneath golden ceilings that proclaimed Venetian supremacy over sea and land. Yet this magnificence came with constant vigilance. The palace adjoined the prisons across the narrow canal, and here the Council of Ten met in secret chambers, maintaining the Republic's security through a vast network of informants and swift, often brutal justice. The Doge himself lived within these walls, a prisoner of his own magnificence, forbidden to leave Venice without the Republic's permission. His every movement governed by protocol so elaborate, it took a small library of regulations to record. When he emerged onto the balcony overlooking the piazza, he appeared not as a monarch but as the living embodiment of the Republic itself, draped in gold brocade, the ceremonial corno on his head, surrounded by advisors whose collective power checked his every impulse. The piazza before the palace served as Venice's stage for spectacles both sacred and secular, where religious processions wound through crowds of merchants, where executions reminded the populace of justice's severe face, and where the Republic celebrated its victories with pageantry designed to overwhelm foreign observers with the sheer magnificence of Venetian ceremony and the immutable power it represented. Where the Grand Canal bent in its serpentine course through the city, the Rialto stood as Venice's commercial soul. The old wooden bridge swayed under the weight of merchants and money changers, and here ships from distant ports unloaded their treasures. Sacks of pepper from India, bales of silk from Damascus, barrels of German silver that would be minted into ducats in the nearby mint, all passed through Rialto's warehouses. The Fondaco buildings rose 3 and 4 stories, their ground floors opening directly onto the canal, where gondolas jostled for position. Inside, Venetian merchants kept their accounts with meticulous precision, calculating profits that would be reinvested in more voyages. The air hummed with languages from across the known world, a chaos that was Venice's strength, for profit knew no borders. The arsenal stretched along the eastern waterfront, a city within the city where the Republic built its power ship by timber frame. Within its high brick walls, thousands of workers moved in coordinated precision that would not be matched until the industrial age. A galley could be built in a single day when necessity demanded, each station adding its component as the hull moved through an assembly line. The rope walks extended for nearly 1,000 feet, twisting hemp into cables strong enough to hold warships against Mediterranean storms. The foundries cast bronze cannon, transforming instruments of sacred sound into engines of maritime dominance. The shipwrights guarded their knowledge jealously, passing techniques from father to son, for these secrets were Venice's truest treasure. The palaces lining the Grand Canal displayed wealth with restraint that was itself ostentation. The Ca' d'Oro gleamed with gold leaf, catching morning light in ways that made the façade shimmer above its reflection. The Palazzo Vendramin presented Renaissance sobriety and classical proportions, declaring that Venetian culture could embrace innovation while maintaining continuity. These were dynastic statements, each family commissioning the finest architects and painters. Inside, life proceeded according to rhythms dictated by commerce and ceremony. The Piano Nobile opened onto salons where Bellini's paintings depicted sacred scenes with Venetian faces. Here, marriages merged commercial interests, alliances were whispered over Ottoman coffee, and strategies were formulated during dinners lasting into early hours. The Basilica of San Marco stood beside the palace as Venice's spiritual testament, though it served political purposes as cunningly as any government building. Its Byzantine domes rose above a facade, encrusted with marble pillaged from across the eastern Mediterranean, each column a trophy from conquered cities. Inside, walls disappeared beneath gold mosaics that caught candlelight and multiplied it across surfaces seeming to breathe with sacred presence. But the basilica was not the patriarch's seat, but the Doge's chapel, a symbol of Venice's independence from papal authority. The bones of St. Mark, stolen from Alexandria, legitimized this autonomy. The Pala d'Oro behind the altar, studded with gems from centuries of trade and conquest, epitomized the Venetian fusion of sacred and mercantile. But the early 16th century would bring challenges that even Venice's wisdom could not overcome. In 1508, nearly every major power in Europe united in the League of Cambrai with a single purpose: to humble Venice and seize its mainland territories. The Venetian army, accustomed to naval supremacy but less experienced in land warfare, suffered catastrophic defeat at Agnadello. In a single day, the Republic lost everything it had spent generations acquiring in the terra firma. Cities that had welcomed Venetian rule now opened their gates to invading armies. The shock reverberated through palaces and counting houses. Families who had invested in mainland estates watched their fortunes evaporate. The government, which had seemed invincible in its pragmatism, scrambled to forge new alliances and buy off enemies with whatever remained in the treasury. Churches held special masses, and the Senate debated long into the night, searching for paths through the crisis that seemed to threaten the Republic's very existence. The defeat at Agnadello did not destroy Venice, but it revealed the limits of the Republic's power, showing that even the most sophisticated state could not entirely master the forces of European politics. The city would recover much territory through the very diplomacy and financial cunning that had built the empire. Yet the psychological impact endured. Venice had been reminded that its true strength lay not in territorial conquest but in the sea, in trade, in the complex networks of finance and diplomacy that connected it to every corner of the known world. The territorial ambitions that had driven expansion in the previous century gave way to a more conservative strategy of preservation and adaptation. Standing in Venice today, surrounded by tourists photographing the same views that Canaletto would paint 2 centuries after our moment, it becomes easy to forget that these stones once witnessed genuine power. The Doge's palace still rises from the waterfront in all its Gothic splendor, but the Doges are gone, replaced by museum guards and guided tours moving through chambers where the fate of nations was once decided. The Rialto Bridge, rebuilt in stone as the 16th century ended, still arches over the Grand Canal. But the merchant banks have become souvenir shops selling Murano glass and carnival masks to visitors seeking fragments of romance. The Arsenal, which once launched fleets that ruled the Mediterranean, now hosts art exhibitions in its vast empty warehouses, the sound of hammers replaced by the hushed conversations of gallery attendees. Even the Basilica of San Marco, still functioning as a church, sees more cameras than prayers, more tourists than worshippers on any given day. Yet something of that earlier Venice persists in the very texture of the city, in the way light reflects off water and marble, in the narrow calli that still follow their medieval paths, in the sudden opening of a tiny campo, where children play as they have for centuries. The palaces still line the Grand Canal, their facades weathered but fundamentally unchanged. And if you arrive early enough, before the cruise ships disgorge their passengers, you can almost hear the echo of merchant galleys being loaded, of noble families arguing over advantageous marriages, of the Republic's measured heartbeat. Venice invites us not just to admire its carefully preserved beauty, but to contemplate the nature of power and its inevitable transformation, to recognize that even the most sophisticated civilization is subject to forces larger than itself, to wonder what future observers will make of our own moment when it too becomes history preserved in whatever technology succeeds our own. If this journey through Venice at its zenith has stirred your imagination, consider following along as we continue to explore other cities in their moments of transformation, using these tools to bridge the centuries and walk, however briefly, beside those who came before us, whose hopes and fears and ambitions were not so different from our own.